This is the Authority Company Podcast, conversations with leaders who are designing our future. Hola, I'm Joe Pardavila, and my guest today is Dr. Michael Horowitz. Michael leads the Community Solution Education System, a nonprofit network of 6 colleges and universities built on radical cooperation. As a clinical psychologist and higher ed innovator, he helps independent institutions share resources, protect identity, and stay financially healthy. He's going to share some lessons from his book, The Community Solution, The Power of Radical Cooperation in Higher Education, which offers a clear playbook for leaders facing enrollment and financial pressure. Dr. Michael Horowitz, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I am great. Thanks for having me, Joe.
You're very welcome. And so I want to start our conversation talking about the idea of help. So, Doc, I grew up with a mother that refused help. Like, she could literally be on fire and be like, no, I'm fine. Like, she's one of those very sacrificial people. And I think that imbued in me that, like, I'm always afraid to ask for help. Like, I don't know. It's not an ego thing. It's just, maybe it's a self-conscious thing. I don't know. But the reason I bring this up is in the book, you talk about you grew up hearing someone asking someone for help. And tell me how important that moment was for you, because like I said, the idea of me asking for help is almost anathema of everything I'm all about. I'm happy to help people, but I can't ask for help. So tell me about why that moment was so pivotal in your life.
Yeah, wonderful nugget that you picked out, Joe. As I write in the book, my parents were both immigrants. It was a time where, assimilation was seen as important. They both learned to speak English, but my mother was 39 when I was born, my father 49. They'd come after World War II. And so I think they both had a sense that, they're going to do their hardest. And they did find a way to prosper and raise a family well enough. But there were just things they didn't know. English was not their first language. They didn't grow up in this country. And so somewhere in my school times, and I think it escalated in high school and maybe thinking about college, where my mother would say, is there someone you could ask? Because it was really, she knew it was important that I go to college, that I get good grades. But there was things that were, just out of her element. And not that it was comfortable, but it socialized for me. Okay, there's other people that know stuff. I don't know everything, and it is okay to ask. And so that was, I think, as I look back and wrote the book, that was a pivotal moment for me.
Well, I guess you grew up a lot healthier than I did, because I certainly was not raised like that. And my mom learned English by watching game shows. What was your parents' hack for learning English when they came over? Did they tell you?
They were both actors, right? And they spoke 5 other languages, not English. And so I think it was television, reading scripts. My father he went into sales in America. My mother continued acting. So she was able to get any part that required an accent. She was never able to do the zero accent. So I think reading scripts, watching movies, watching TVs, absolutely, it was a method of learning.
And jumping on the point about your mother's lesson, how did those sort of lessons wire your instincts to put cooperation over competition? Because I think, again, even for my parents are immigrants too, and it's almost like, you're scrapping and clawing and doing whatever it takes to succeed. And sometimes you may ruffle some feathers. So tell me about how that idea works of cooperation instead of competition.
Where did your parents come from, Joe?
So my mom was a Cuban refugee. She came over in the Freedom Flights in '67. And my father was a sailor from Spain who was visiting family and met my mom here in the late '60s, got together and had a couple of idiots, and the rest is history.
Okay, so you have a real taste for it. You can understand it. I think so. That was one part of it, because actually, if people are willing to help, and you don't have to fly blind. It didn't mean I was walking around every day asking for help, but really when I felt stuck, maybe should have even done it some more. I was also in a youth movement. I write about that. That was very important to me, Young Judea. And as a teenager, got to lead youth groups for kids, in middle school. And so that was also eye-opening to me. We had an advisor who was probably, a few years out of college, but mostly you had teenage kids forming programs, leading games. So I think it was again eye opening because I, a lot of my childhood was spent alone. My parents had divorced. It was me and my mom, me going to school. So entering into this youth movement, seeing people doing things together was kind of a compelling moment. And I think when I got to college, first at Columbia and later at Northwestern, I guess I was wired. I was always interested in politics. My father was a fanatic, had all news radio on constantly. Maybe he thought the war was still going on. And I was a keen observer of my environments. And I was like, really weird. In both universities, Columbia and Northwestern, things seemed like they didn't work together. Couldn't fully tell why. You know, you were told at Columbia to take this human development course from psychologists because that was a good first year course. But then when you majored in psychology, they said, no, that doesn't count. You know, that wasn't taught in the psychology department. Same thing a few years later. They were proud to have the first psychoanalysis undergrad course. A faculty member came for the medical school, and I was a psych major at that point. They said, no, that doesn't count. That's so. Uh, Similar observations when I went on to Northwestern Medical School for my PhD. So I had the sense of I think there's a better way to do this. And as we're talking about it, I also a lot of my company when I was a kid alone was listening to sports.
Mm.
So baseball, hockey, even though I didn't understand it, basketball. So it's clear if you listen to sports, you get things done by working together. You can have teams that are all stars and lose because there isn't that team spirit.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's great. Yeah, it's funny because so my brother was the first person in my family to graduate from college. I dabbled in college and not finished it, but I'm a card carrying Gen Xer, Michael, and I grew up in the generation who was like, it was basically automatic. High school, college, and then you found a job. You found that job that you could hopefully have for 20, 30 years, drop dead and retire, whichever comes first. But there has been this shift lately, and I think, I often joke, Michael, on these podcasts that Americans and I think Western culture is really good at overcorrection. So like back in the 80s and 90s, overcorrected to college that like I remember reading like want ads for like receptionists and they're like, need a BA. I'm like, to be a receptionist? Why? What is that all about? And now we have this swing, the pendulum, of course, the overcorrection happening to like, nah, you don't need college. Who needs all the debt? You'll learn more in the school of hard knocks. And the reason I bring up this context is like your love for education. Obviously, you made a life out of it. So tell me about, as someone who has seen it through the lens and has seen these shifts play out in real time, what do you think about it? Is this are we getting to more of a centering point now that we've seen it go to the no college movement? Talk about what you see now in your world.
Well, I hope so, Joe, because you're really right. We tend to live in a society of extremes. And over the weekend, I listened to a lot of podcasts, so there's discussion. A lot of what happens on social media is actually amplified by foreign countries. So it's because as I travel around the country and our system is, in 12 fantastic locations all over, I don't find things as polarized as when you're looking at social media or looking at, I guess, traditional media. So college for all was absolutely like an extreme, silly mistake. And even within college for all, there should have been more of a focus on the associate's degrees for some, because many community college are effectively fantastic trade schools. And I also heard over the weekend, I mean, if you're trained as a skilled electrician today, you will quickly be in six-figure salaries. I'm talking about really high six-figure salaries. So absolutely, we need to open the space for that. Now, the other thing with, college is a waste of time, absurd. So many data points show that the higher your degree level, the more you will earn in a lifetime. Now, is that true for every single person? Probably not. Our colleges focus on degrees that have, I would say, two kinds of ROI. They're mostly professional degrees. You can't do these professions without a college degree. You can't be a school teacher, a psychologist, a physician, a social worker without going to college and to graduate school. You will make a good living, and you also have a very rewarding life because they're professions where you help people. There's meaningful uh, opportunities, and there's a lot of choices. I mean, I trained as a clinical psychologist. I never thought it. I thought I'd be going into private practice and sitting in a room one person at a time. So it created immense opportunities. And the other thing I heard over the weekend is, again, that noise. Everyone doesn't need college, and hiring managers are still emphasizing the college degree. So good luck applying for many jobs and saying, you know what, college are hard knocks. No, because there's so many applicants, right? There's going to be ways that there's a first cut that's still a cut. So we do need to find that centering place, um, but certainly not stop at high school. We need to get people educated to do something. Well, they'll earn a good living and hopefully have a meaningful life.
Nice. All right. So that's current state. So tell me about when you first realized that higher education was broken in a way that small fixes would not alone solve. Like it's almost I almost feel like there are a lot of industries that like almost America too big to fail, too big to fix. When tell me about that moment for you when you realize no, we can actually do something about this.
Okay, so my two alma maters, Columbia University and Northwestern University, and we'll see now because the whole sector's under pressure, but probably too big to fail. Right. So you can do all these uncooperative things. There's a long lineage of siloing and not cooperation in higher education. That could be a whole other topic. Then I find myself 12 years after the Chicago School of Professional Psychology declined to hire me for faculty in 1988. They recruited me to be the president because they were out. So don't burn your bridges is the other story, and I never did. And I was and the school was on its last legs. A couple of hundred students. What had been very unique. There were many competitors at that point. I had to get serious about Plan B if we failed, merge the single program, but also had my ideas for growth, which is worked out. Over the next 9 years, I'd go to these meetings of Illinois independent colleges, and it'd be a lot of talk about projects we could do together. We did lobby the state for funding, but I remember asking a guy from a bigger university, how come we never do any of these things together? And he said, oh, don't worry about it. We never do anything together. We're not going to. We're not even going to buy toilet paper together. So that was eye-opening. And then I'm starting to see the stress points. In the late 2000s, there were a lot of economic pressures. And I'm reading about colleges going out of business or slashing their budgets. And so by year 9 at the Chicago School, we'd grown enormously. We had over 3,000 students. I thought, what if I could apply some of my thinking about creating scale for other colleges? Because I know that, there are so many outstanding colleges in the United States. Some would say too many. One of the problems might be there's just too many and there are not enough students for everybody. But at that time, I thought, I think there's a structure because I had seen as the Chicago School had grown, we were able to get better technology, better experts in finance, more faculty. More faculty means more creative ideas. In fact, as we were launching new programs, after I launched the first couple of new ones, then a faculty member who was relatively new said, let's start this program, which I'd never even heard of. And I said, let's start that just because it's a faculty member driving that. So that was the impetus for the community solution education system.
Wow, that's great. And let me ask you about like the finances of higher education, because I almost feel like when you hear these stories of colleges struggling, having to make financial cuts, whether it's, head counts or actual budgets, you'll hear the outside noise being like, wait, they constantly have new students coming in. Some of these have endowments. Some of them do have donations from alumni. Why are these schools struggling? And for me, as someone who's like big into pop culture, I always talk about like Hollywood math. Like there was there was a story of that Queen movie, Bohemian Rhapsody, that came out a few years ago. it made nearly $1 billion at the box office, won tons of Oscars. And at the end of the day, the studio comes back and says, we didn't make any money on this. And people are like, wait, what? How does that make any sense? So bridge these two ideas together of the idea of like, is the math is not mathing?
The math is not
Why?
mathing. Is it,
Yeah.
and there's so much noise in this space. So many things I could tell you about this. First of all, in private, nonprofit, higher ed, there's the sticker price, and everyone's like, "Oh, you must be making a ton of money. It's $50,000." No, it turns out you're actually charging like 20,000. And these days, people are desperate to recruit students to just grow the numbers. They'll sometimes recruit athletes at, guess what, tuition price? Zero. So they'll give 100% discount, and the athlete will leave as soon as typically he perceives a better opportunity in another college. I asked the college president, your sticker is 50, you charge 25, you get good. Why don't you just say my tuition's 25? He said, I'll never do it, because the parents love getting that letter that says your son or daughter received a $20,000 scholarship. So there's that whole part that's crazy. Now, before I came to the Chicago school, I say by accident because I didn't even know what it was. I spent 12 years in for-profit higher education. And one of the lessons there was you got to minimally balance your budget. But there was an owner who was like, I want to see in the black.
Yeah.
So, so, uh, I mean, I don't know where nonprofits or nonprofit higher ed got the idea like it's okay to lose money year over year over year and it'll fix itself down the road, because it won't. The institutions you're talking about who get all the donations and the money are the rich ones. Because good luck being like a failing financial institution and go to your alumni and say, give me money that probably will go in a black hole. It's not 100%. There's some cases where alumni pitched in, kept it going, but people love giving to the wealthier institutions because they can name something, they're secure that their donation will be there for the long term. So really, really complicated stuff. And despite online, we're still a very people dependent sector. And if people are your biggest cost, you have to pay people enough to earn a good living, and there's inflation, and there are all these other crazy impacts. I mean, health insurance costs are skyrocketing across higher ed, and I don't necessarily expect the public to be in the weeds on that, but we have a lot of costs that go up: technology, software, legal costs, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know how much math I mathed for you there, but that's part of the background.
I get it. All right, so let's give a little plug to your day job, the Community Solution Education System. For folks not familiar, give us the elevator pitch on it.
So in 2009, I launched the Community Solution Education System with one college, the Chicago School. And I said, we're creating a community for other colleges with a powerful mission, really interested in student success. Come join us. Could have been a complete flop because it could have stayed with one college. Within a year, two great institutions joined: Pacific Oaks College and Children's School and the Colleges of Law. Today, we have 6 institutions. And I would say we use a lot of great terms. One of them is better together. I'll give you an example. Last week, I was in Pasadena. There are faculty who want to go into administration, become deans, department chairs, maybe presidents down the line. We have finished the first year of a fellowship for faculty across 6 institutions. When you do that, you create that community. You get great ideas bouncing off each other. HR people around the community solution meet on a regular basis, finance people. So you bring people together, you create that sense of community, you get more. Most people say, well, how much money do you save? I say, that's not our focus. If you need an answer, it's zero. What I'm going to tell you is, for the same money you're spending, you're going to get a whole lot more. So of course you're going to get better technology, finance, information systems. The real part and power, though, is bringing people together across various disciplines. So today we have 6 institutions. Sorry, the elevator ride would have to be really long.
I was gonna say, elevator's stuck at this point, Michael. It's
Yeah,
okay.
it's stuck. I'm a talker. I could be. I grew up shy, so I'm making up for it.
Good.
Uh, we have 6 institutions that can operate on the scale of a much larger institution, but each one is really focused and intimate and a great opportunity for their students.
And obviously, a lot of people notice there's a lot of drama in the world of higher education over the past couple of years. We won't get into that, but I wanted to connect this to the idea of you building shared governance across independent institutions. How does that work? What kind of pushback did you see early on? Because as we all know, I think a lot of people like to put all colleges in a monolith. All these colleges think exactly the same, and they don't. So how do you bridge the divide there when there's maybe a couple differences, whether it's in the way they teach, the way they operate? Tell me more about how you get in the weeds.
I'm glad you brought that up while I was stuck in the elevator. You were moving on because governance, again, is something that's kind of off the public radar, and it's maybe the most important element for a healthy college to function. Every college has a board of trustees, whether they're publicly elected or in our cases, private volunteers. And those folks have to get it right because they're the fiduciary people responsible for the budget, for the resources. Throughout a lot of higher ed, they're disconnected from real information, from how the business works. So my thought was, and it's why we have 6. I don't want to have 600, but it's taken 16 years to get to 6. We explained to the college board of trustees, you're going to still be in charge of the day-to-day of this institution. You'll delegate it to a president. There's also going to be a system board that's kind of be guardrails. We summarize it as perfect, the PRFC. The system board makes sure that the purpose of the institution is upheld. If you say, I want to turn my college into a computer store, we're going to have a role in that. Risk, because you said we're not going to get into all the drama, but in all the drama, there's a lot of risk. Finances, legal, the legal implications have jumped skyward since I entered higher education. Financial health. It's like you can't run a good college if you're always scraping for the next dollar. So and compliance, because that's really important. The government at the state, local, federal level, you won't believe how long the document is that I signed on behalf of all our 6 colleges, telling the U.S. Department of Ed that we're following, this full set of rules. I will tell you that initially people said, well, that's crazy. Why don't you just have one board? You have like 80 or 90 board members. And I'm like, no, the college boards are going to be real fans of our system because they're going to see it work for their college. And that's what's proven out. I would say that they're some of our strongest fans. And I'll tell you, the other interesting thing is every 2 years, we bring the whole community of trustees together with the presidents. You're talking about 100 people. And we have our own community meeting and get together and education for our trustees. So governance is critical. It needs to be done a lot better for higher ed to function a lot better.
All right. So you mentioned that you got 6. 600 would be too much. What, have you started, forecasting out, how many schools does this kind of system work for at one time?
I think we could have more. We've taken a pause because
Okay.
I've talked to 200 since we started, and many are now closed, which is a shame because they didn't need to be, and they get stuck on this control thing. Well, it'll be a change of control. It is. But I don't know. You get a lot in return, right? And what's interesting is there's a ton of interest right now in our model. So there is number one, there's been an increase in college closures. We're up to about 160 in the last 8 or 9 years.
Wow.
There's been a spate of mergers recently, which is another way to create scale. We offer a different alternative. And now I have people knocking on my door saying, will you explain the system model? Because we want to do that. And I'm happy to do it. The former president of our major accreditor, WASC, Jamie Studley, she asked me, could you have 100? I said, I don't think so. I'd rather see 100 systems. So I'm hoping that our model takes off. We've taken a pause because we were spending a lot of energy talking to prospective colleges. And now our 6 colleges are growing so well. We have a lot of base of expansion for new programs. I mean, we're about to celebrate the first graduates of our first medical school and this coming year, and we'll be launching a second medical school. And I guarantee you that small colleges cannot pull off projects like that on their own. I mean, that's an example of something really big that you can do much better together.
That's great. And it's funny you mentioned that about you had these conversations with 200 schools and they were not really willing to make the jump there. And I'm curious because there's the education system has always had this sort of attitude of like resistance to change. And a doctor friend loves to use this joke, like, how many academics does it take to change a light bulb? And then someone says, no one said there'd be change. Uh,
Yeah, that's
so
good.
tell me about this world and how you're able to maneuver and sort of change the mindset of these of folks in this world where, man, they do not like change for anything.
In today's Inside Higher Ed, there's a column about a guy visiting the Middle States, another big accreditor conference, and seeing much more bluntness at the conference in terms of financial stress, pressure, in terms of what the government is doing, rapid change. So I'm hoping there's a little bit more awareness these days that the pace has to be much faster. What's at the same time, in the last year, I read this great novel. My friend Rachel Tour, who is a faculty member, writes a lot about higher ed, called Stoner, and it's set in a mythical college pre-World War I for the next 40 years or so. And part of the point, it's a great novel, number one, a lot of drama, keen interest, relationships. But Rachel's point, why it's a must read, is she says, there are many institutions where nothing is any different than described in that novel now, and it was written 60 years ago, kind of like this is how we do it. And I don't think that's true by and large of our 6 colleges, because to join our system you embrace the idea
Yeah.
that change is a positive. uh, but I that probably could be a podcast series on higher education. I mean, higher ed has lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I remember talking to a president of a much wealthier college. I mean, none of our colleges are wealthy. And he was saying, well, isn't that good? We've outlasted all these places. And I looked up his financial data. He has a $2 billion endowment, which by the way, you're not really allowed to spend endowments on operating budgets for the
Yeah.
most part. Nonetheless, it's a cushion. It's throwing off a lot of money. So I think if too many colleges were trying to chase after those big wealthy ones, which are this very tiny segment. Aren't you sick of hearing about, the students applying to Ivy League colleges, right? Because so if they don't get into Yale, and you go to Grinnell, you'll be fine. But there's 8 million students at community colleges. There's millions of students at the other thousands of colleges. Let's focus on them.
That's great. Yeah, it's funny. That whole endowment thing is, I know enough of that to be dangerous, but the idea of people thinking that if a school has like a $5 million endowment, there's so many strings that is going to be a ball of yarn because all those endowments come with strings. People say, I'm going to donate X amount of dollars, but you can only use it in the drama department, or you can only use it in the medical school, or you can use it for a new building with my name on it. People think endowment, oh, these people have a piggy bank they could just go to anytime. Much more complicated, and I'm sure you know more about that than I ever will.
Well, if you can believe it, again, in today's press, an Ohio college, another one that we talked to, now closed, and the state is going after the board members who, at the end of the days of that college, did spend the endowment for operations. I mean, it's very rare for trustees to be held liable by the government criminally or civilly. And they're like, wow, you guys messed up, because when a college is closing, in fact, you're supposed to go to the state attorney general and ask for any permission to deviate, because that money was given tax free, sort of as a trust that the government approved, no taxes on this, on and on and on.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
what a world that education system is. And one of the things you talk about in the book and something that I could super relate to is continuous urgency. I'm a big fan of momentum, keeping things moving. So the question is, I that works well for me, but I don't have like a team of people and professors. And so how do you maintain that sort of mindset of continuous urgency without burning people out? Because some people are just not wired to have that momentum, oh, constantly moving, constantly getting things done. Tell me about sort of dancing that fine line.
Yeah, it doesn't mean, every person at the university, every faculty, every student has to be spinning. But when you get to the level of leadership, the board of trustees, the president, I heard advice early in my career, president giving a talk, said the president has to have constant urgency. The day you don't feel that anymore, it's time to retire from that place. Maybe you'll feel it somewhere else. That's the job of leaders. Look down the road. What's happening? And if we don't bring that urgency, we're going to miss stuff, and we may get steamrolled by changes. So I think at that leadership level, and that's what we're trying to do as we educate faculty who want to become administrators.
Nice. And I want to circle back to the beginning of our conversation when you learned the lesson from your mom of like, ask for help. If you don't know something, say it. Um, how do you bring that sort of ethos to the folks you work with in terms of like letting leaders admit that they don't know something without losing credibility? Because I think that sort of four-letter phrase automatically some people thinks it's like demerits on,
Yeah.
credibility. How do
I've
you do
coined
that?
this term radical cooperation. The beauty in higher ed is that we do have a lot of expertise. So it's malpractice in a sense to not ask other people who know. We've had a board chair, Edward Bergmark, for many years, and he says, I like playing team sports. The only way to succeed, and he's run and started big companies. So I think this applies outside of higher ed. We're a team, ask for help. One of the most interesting sports examples is that the great Michael Jordan was briefly sat down earlier in his career with the Bulls. The assistant coach went to Coach Phil Jackson and said, "We're going to lose if he keeps hogging the ball." So they sat him down, and he still stayed and became a great scorer. But all of a sudden, he was doing a lot of assists, passing the ball, and made stars out of some of the other players on those historic Chicago Bulls team. So I try to cultivate that. I've learned lessons from institutions outside of higher ed. Zingerman's is one I talk about, the food business in Ann Arbor, and Rick Bayless's restaurants, long surviving restaurants, thriving, which is unusual and really part of their ethic. Again, is building that community, but also changing with the times.
Hmm. I must congratulate you for being a Chicago guy and going 30 minutes until you mentioned Michael Jordan. So well done.
Right?
If you weren't going to do it, I was going to drop it in at some point here. But let me ask you in terms of it's 2026 now. If higher education is doing the same thing, the same way we've been talking about this, they're making the same mistakes over and over again. What worries you most in 5 years? Is it the fact that you're going to see more and more schools closing? Is that a number one concern?
That would be top of the list. You'll definitely see more college closures. There was a gentleman now sadly passed away, Clayton Christensen, his co-author Michael Horn, about 13 years ago, predicted that a quarter of colleges would close, and Michael Horn updated in the last year to say he thinks it's going even faster than that earlier prediction. So you will. I'll tell you what's sad about that is so many of these colleges are significant to their local community. So beyond the college themselves, they may be the major employer. They're a pathway for people in the community to get educated. So it's not just this sort of abstract loss. We lose something important when we lose colleges. We do have these pressures on costs, and I'm hoping that we can create less complexity because there's state regulators and federal regulators and professional accreditors and institutional accreditors, uh, all in the name of quality, but it sure drives up the cost of everything. So we need to have an intelligent discussion about that. And we need to, I'll tell you, the biggest problem in higher ed is the low rate of completion. There's another thing the public doesn't know. The average is 60% after 6 years for a 4-year degree. Many colleges, 30 or 40%. Now that we have technology and we know more about teaching and learning, we can do better. The worst debt is $10,000 for someone who went to college and didn't complete. It's worse than someone who becomes a psychologist or a physician and owes $100,000 because they'll have the means to pay it back.
Wow. Well, Doc, every time I wrap up these conversations, I take folks behind the dedication of the book, and you dedicated to the love of my life. Jeannie, your deep support, encouragement, wisdom, and love as we co-regulate our partnership as parents and professionals have given me more than I ever dared to dream. So tell me, obviously, just so you don't have to sleep on the couch, what is the other reason that you dedicated the book to Jeannie?
Well, we met in the waiting room of our psychology internship in 1984. I think we agree it was love at first sight. It certainly was for me because it was an outpatient clinic and it was 9:00 in the morning. We could have been a clinic outpatient or one of the 4 interns who were about to meet each other for the first day. It turns out we were one of the 4. We got together at the end of that year, and she's a very accomplished clinical psychologist herself. She's a great mother and wife, and really, I do feel very rich in terms of the life we've had together. So wasn't even close for the person that this book would be dedicated to.
Awesome. And the name of the book is The Community Solution, The Power of Radical Cooperation in Higher Education. He is Dr. Michael Horowitz. Doc, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe.
And that's going to do it for this episode. If you want to find out more information about Dr. Horowitz and our other amazing authors, go to theauthoritycompany.com.